You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast, brought to you by MartinClinic.com. During the episode, the doctors share a lot of information. As awesome as the info may be, it is not intended to diagnose, cure, treat, or prevent any disease. It's strictly for informational purposes.
Hey, I want to quickly talk to you about the 5 main causes of hair loss. Now, one of the questions we get asked a lot has to do with hair loss. And what we try to help people understand is that hair loss is an effect. It's not the cause. Something is causing hair loss. And in our experience, a majority of the people will be having hair loss or hair thinning as a result of these 5 things. So I'm going to quickly talk to you today about those 5 causes. But first, here's a few interesting things. And you have to understand this because it'll make the rest of this a lot easier. You have about 100,000 plus, give or take, hairs on your head. And it's normal to lose about 100 per day. That's normal. However, it's not normal when you start to have a lot more than that occur. And there are basically 3 phases of hair growth. There's one phase called the growing phase, and 90% of your hair is in this phase, and it can last about 2 to 3 years. So again, a majority of your hair at most of the time is in this phase of growing. Then there's a resting phase of about 3 months, and then the hair sheds. And that's what happens. So if your hair doesn't get what it needs, then the growing phase is shortened and a bunch of your hair dies off together because, again, 90% of your hair is in that phase. So if 90% of your hair is not getting what it needs, then a big chunk of your hair can start to fall out, and that's what ends up happening. So let's talk about the first big cause, and of course that has to do with a sluggish thyroid. Now, your thyroid will also give you a whole bunch of other symptoms, but hair loss and hair thinning and thinning of the eyebrows is definitely one of them. Now, whenever I talk about the thyroid, I like to share a story of something that happened to me when I was younger. Now, I'm a competitive person by nature, and I remember a bunch of us going out. It was like a Saturday night, and we were going to go rent some go-karts at the go-kart track. And of course, we wanted to race, and we were really excited about this. So we all picked our go-karts, and you get in there, you put your helmet on, and then the attendant lets you kind of get onto the actual track. And I pressed on the gas pedal, and I realized right away I was finished. My go-kart was not as fast as everybody else's go-kart. It didn't matter how hard I pressed the gas pedal. Whenever we hit a straightaway, everybody else's kart was faster than mine. So no matter how good of a driver I was or wasn't, it didn't matter. I couldn't beat them. So it was at that point after the race that I learned for the first time what this word called governor meant. And basically it restricted the amount of speed in a go-kart, and mine was too restricted. And the reason I tell you that story is because your thyroid is the gas pedal for energy and metabolism. It's your body's gas pedal. When you have sluggish thyroid, it's like you have a governor on it, and it slows everything down. And your hair follicles are also regulated, like pretty much everything else in your body, by your thyroid. And hair follicles have a shorter lifespan, and they turn over rapidly, so you've got to constantly make new ones. So when your thyroid is slow, your hair follicles don't regenerate fast enough, and then you end up with hair loss. So thyroid is a big cause of hair loss. But the second cause here that I want to talk about has to do with high cortisol. Now, here is how the thyroid works. The thyroid only does what other things tells it to do. So your hypothalamus tells your pituitary gland to get your thyroid going. Then your thyroid makes a whole bunch of hormones, T4, T3, T2, T1, and a little bit of calcitonin. Now, T3 is the active form of your thyroid, yet 90% of the hormones made by your thyroid is in the form of T4, meaning it has to be converted from T4 into T3. So that's what happens. Now, cortisol stops the conversion of T4 to T3. So you end up with less active form of the thyroid hormone, and for all intensive purposes, you have sluggish thyroid. So cortisol can cause hair loss because it affects your thyroid. That's one way. However, that's not the only way. Cortisol also can directly, without going through your thyroid, decrease new hair growth, and it speeds up hair loss. So cortisol is kind of a a double whammy. It'll hurt your thyroid, and then it'll also directly decrease hair growth. Now, let's talk about another big cause, which most people do not associate with hair loss, and that has to do with low stomach acid and digestive enzymes. And there's a saying out there that you are what you eat, and that's not completely true. It's you are what you absorb. You have to be able to get the nutrients from the food that you're eating. And here's the thing. Hair is made up of protein fibers, which means you need enough protein to grow. Now, your protein digestion needs stomach acid. Stomach acid will break down protein. So, if you don't have enough stomach acid, then you can't break down protein. And stomach acid decreases as we age, and a majority of the people have low stomach acid. Here are some of the common symptoms: constipation, diarrhea, bloating, especially following a meal. If a person just feels like they're going to explode after a meal, they do not have enough stomach acid or digestive enzymes. Indigestion, burping, chronic yeast infections, and the biggest one is heartburn. Heartburn is usually a misdiagnosis. It's actually a problem with decreased stomach acid. And of course, a big symptom of low stomach acid is thinning hair or hair loss, because again, low stomach acid means you can't break down protein. And if you can't break down protein, your hair doesn't get what it needs to make hair. Which brings me to another cause, which is low protein intake. Now, I don't know if you remember this movie. I grew up loving action movies, and The Expendables, which was a great action movie. And the thing is, it was called Expendables because these are the guys that you can send in to get a job done. And if they don't come back, it doesn't matter because they're expendable. And your hair, as I mentioned, is made up of protein fibers, which means you need enough protein to grow. Women don't get anywhere near the amount of protein necessary. And your body determines that your hair is expendable. It's not going to send protein to your hair when it needs to send it to your muscles, and it needs to send it to other important areas. The amino acids in protein are needed by everything in your body, and it's definitely not going to sacrifice important organ function just to help your hair grow. So if you're not getting enough protein to start off with, you're not going to have healthy hair. That's important. And here's another cause: low iron. So when your hair grows, they require a lot of iron. And this is one of the most common causes of hair loss. And iron deficiency is caused by blood loss, by hernias. A lot of pain medications can cause it. You're not eating enough iron, or you're not absorbing enough, which goes back again to stomach digestive enzymes, stomach acid, or a digestive disorder. And here's one more thing I always have to point out when we talk about iron, because a lot of people do not eat enough meat, or they don't eat meat because they're vegetarian or they're vegan. And it's important to understand this and why you would need to supplement big time, because there are two types of iron, basically. There's a heme iron, which is found in meat, and what a non-heme iron, which is found in plant-based foods. So heme iron is easily absorbed by the body, and non-heme isn't. So I want to look at the example of spinach, because a lot of people say, Popeye kind of made this famous, it's full of iron, right? And so spinach has 2.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. And you look at a steak and you say, well, it has about 2.5 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. You're saying, yeah, spinach is king. It's a great source of iron, but only 1.7% of the iron is actually absorbed, because a majority of it is it's in the non-heme form. So that means when you eat 100 grams and you get 2.6 milligrams of iron, you only absorb 0.044 milligrams of iron. That's nothing. But the steak, on the other hand, that has maybe a little bit less iron per 100 grams, 20% of that is absorbed. So that means you get 0.5 grams milligrams from the original 2.5 milligrams. So you can see absorption matters. A food may have iron, but if it's in the non-heme form, you're not going to get exactly what you need from it, which is why if you're not eating meat, or you have a digestive issue that you're not absorbing iron properly, or you're bleeding, or you're taking medications, then you definitely want to supplement with iron as well. So again, those are the 5 main causes. So chances are, if you're losing your hair or your hair is thinning, one of these 5, sluggish thyroid, high cortisol, low stomach acid and digestive enzymes, low protein intake, and low iron is the cause. And in our experience, all 5 of these take place at the same time, which is why hair loss can be rapid or hair thinning can happen quickly, because in our experience, most women have these 5 things going on at the same time, or at least 4 of the 5 things going on at the same time. So you can see there's a lot of causes, and if you're losing your hair or your hair is thinning, you want to address it, figure out what's causing it, and fix that, and then your hair will return to normal and your hair loss will stop.
You've reached the end of another Dr. is In podcast with your hosts, Dr. Martin Jr. and Sr. Be sure to catch our next episode, and thanks for listening.